So yesterday we were discussing about production-linked incentives. So we were talking about why this scheme had come into existence. What are the important aspects of this scheme? As we have mentioned, why it had come into existence is because of stagnation in private sector investment, especially in the manufacturing sector. In the last 10 years or so, what we have seen is that the private sector investment has not picked up the way it should have been. Without investment, it is not possible for any country to grow also. So that is the reason why. Another thing is that, as we discussed yesterday, there are so many disadvantages that our Indian industry suffers compared to their Western counterparts. We gave all those disadvantages yesterday. So in order to make our industry competitive in the global market, in order to improve the share of manufacturing sector in our GDP, in order to improve our exports, the government had come out with this PLI scheme, Production Linked Incentive Scheme. And the government had initially started with automobile sector, and it was extended to all other sectors. The basic objective is that this PLI would act as a catalyst for private sector investment and consequently the economic growth as well as employment. Let us see whether the scheme had been as successful as it should have been or as it was imagined by our policy makers. Let us look at it. Some of the important facts related to the scheme. They had given they had taken the example of mobile phones, cell phones, right? Yesterday we have spoken about all the limitations, all the problems. So it is not possible to overcome all those problems. Yesterday we have discussed in a very short period of time, right? It is not at all possible. So then what did the government do? The government had come out with a fast track solution to overcome all the problems that we have mentioned yesterday. Yesterday we spoke about lack of adequate infrastructure, absence of skilled personnel, high cost of borrowing, and absence of investment in research and development. And we also spoke about limited design capabilities of our industry. So these are all long-term problems. That is what we must remember. Long-term structural problems. Since the government cannot find a permanent solution to these long-term structural problems, the government had come out with an intermediate solution, temporary solution in the form of PLI scheme. That is what you must remember. Proceeding further, as I said, this Raghuram Rajan and Rahul Singh, both of them have conducted research regarding this PLI scheme, and on the basis of their research, they had come to these following conclusions. Let us see what they had to say. They said that custom duties on mobile phones, mobile imports, especially import of these mobile phones, custom duties on mobile imports, it was increased to 20%. It was increased to 20% in April 2018. Right? Custom duties on mobile imports, it was increased to 20% in April 2018. What happens? What is the reason why the government follows this kind of protectionist policies? When you are increasing the custom duties, what is the objective here? Yes, basically to incentivize the domestic industry. So for example, the cost of production is 100 rupees. Then the government is imposing 20 rupees tax. So in India, it is 120 rupees. Let us assume that the domestic cost of production is, say, 115 rupees. If you do not impose the custom duties, what happens? The domestic industry suffers the most. So that is the reason why the government imposes these custom duties to protect the domestic industry. This is what we call protectionist policies that almost every country in the world will follow to encourage their domestic industries. So the government had increased these customs duties on imports by 20%. And what happens? It led to immediately increase in the domestic prices of mobiles. Obviously, from 100 rupees it has increased to 120 rupees. It has led to increase in the domestic price of mobiles. Right? So, for example, iPhone 13, i13, I am talking about 13, I know it has, 14 has come, right? Right. All of you are very, very good with absolutely idiotic statistics, right? Unwanted, right? Right now, we are not in a position to buy Nokia phone also, right? Why do we have to think about i14 or 15? i200 also comes, but we'll still be left with the Nokia only, like this phone, right? Huh? Right, yes. So, for example, this i13, it was 92,000 rupees 500 in Chicago. 92,500 rupees in Chicago. Same thing is 1,29,000 rupees in India. Right? 1,14,000 rupees, 1,29,000 rupees in India. 40%, right? Increase in almost the prices in Chicago compared to what are the prices that you find in America. It is 1,29,000 rupees in India. Why? Because rest of the amount of money was the custom duties imposed by the government to protect domestic industries. Still, you people are not patriotic. You will only buy iPhones. You can say that you are patriotic because you are also contributing to the tax revenues, like liquor, right? Whatever may be the prices, your patriotism makes you blind to all those prices, right? So this is what, right? Now, what is this PLI scheme? Let us see. For example, in this PLI scheme, if you are a mobile manufacturer, let us assume that you are a mobile manufacturer. In the PLI scheme, what exactly is the kind of incentives that you will be getting? In the first year, you will get 6% payment by the government as part of PLI, production linked incentives, right? Right? And by fifth year, it will come down to 4%. For example, your cost of production is 100 rupees, right? So 6 rupees subsidy you will get from the government. You will get a return of 6 rupees from the government under PLI scheme. Are you getting the point here? Very simple. You are a mobile manufacturer. You have invested 100 rupees in the mobile manufacturing company in the first year. Out of this 100 rupees investment, the government gives you back 6 rupees as a PLI under PLI scheme, production linked incentives scheme. By the time it is 5th year, you will get a 4% return. So on the one hand, what is happening here is, on the one hand, the government is increasing the customs duties, and on the other hand, government is also reducing your cost of production. So in case of take the case of iPhone only, the taxes are 40%, right? And then 6% you are getting here. 40 plus 6, 46% advantage you will be having if you are producing in India. This is what the government is doing as part of this PLI scheme. Of course, this kind of incentives are given to you only when you meet a certain production target. If you produce a certain number of mobile phones, this kind of 6% subsidy is given to you if you meet a certain targets that the government has set for you. These targets in terms of your investment and sales also. If you produce certain number of mobile phones, and also if you show your sales also, both these conditions have to be met for you to receive the benefits, right? Yes, you are asking them. Same question, same answer, right? Right. So this is what and there is no requirement under this scheme. There is no requirement. There is no requirement for manufacturers to produce. For manufacturers to produce minimum value of cell phones in India. Minimum number of minimum value of cell phones in India. Minimum number of cell phones in India. So what does this mean? Producing a minimum value of cell phones in India. We are going a little bit deep into economics here. What do you mean by that? There are two things here: producing in India, assembling in India. So if you talk about Make in India, why it was a failure? What was the reason why Make in India campaign was a failure? The important condition the government had put is that you have to produce everything in India, whether you are a domestic manufacturer or a foreign manufacturer, you have to produce everything in India, then only you will get all kinds of financial incentives. And obviously the foreign countries, especially foreign investors, they did not find Make in India campaign that much attractive for them. Why? Because, as we have discussed, because of all the so many inadequacies in terms of our production. We don't have the skilled personnel, we don't have the technology, we don't have investment in research and development, and our tax rates are also very, very high. So it has made sure that all these foreign investors shy away from India. So Make in India campaign was almost a complete failure. That is when the government has realized that other countries are opting for other methods. For example, as economic survey sometime back has pointed out, why China had become successful. China never speaks about Make in China or Made in China. China talks about assemble in China. That means, I gave you the example of iPhone. It has so many parts, more than hundreds of parts, and they are produced in different parts of the world, and all of them are brought to China, and they were assembled in China. That is the reason why China made a huge amount of profits. And what else happened with this? What did the Chinese government do, or Chinese manufacturers do? They copied the technology of iPhone. When it was produced, it was assembled in China. They copied the technology and had come out with better technologies at a much lesser price. Like in the case of that kind of phones you use in rickshaw pullers, right? For example, if iPhone costs around 1,30,000 rupees, you get the same thing, with this Chinese mobile manufacturers at around 35,000 or 40,000 rupees. And that is how China could capture the market. On the other hand, what did we do? As part of this Make in India campaign, we had put the condition that everything has to be procured in India, raw material, everything has to be manufactured in India. Obviously, it was not at all attractive for the foreign investors. And that is the reason why, as part of this self-reliance Atmanirbhar Bharat program, what the government has said is that you don't have to manufacture in India. Even if you assemble in India, you will get the 6% PLI scheme. That is what it is. As I said, there is no need for any minimum number of cell phones that have to be manufactured in India. That is what we have mentioned the earlier point. You don't have to completely manufacture all of them in India by procuring the raw material, technology, everything from India only. You get all the parts from different different parts of the world and then assemble them in India. Even then, after you will get the 6% PLI scheme. That is what as we study in economics again, before 1991, we'll study these things as part of planning also. One of the important objectives of our planning process was self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency means what? Self-sufficient. It means that you are able to produce everything in your country without depending on the rest of the world. Self-sufficient. Is it possible for any country to be self-sufficient in this age? Obviously not. You cannot produce anything. You cannot produce everything in your own country. Self-sufficient is not at all possible. Even if you try to produce, the cost of production would be so high in your country that it makes completely economically completely irrational to do the same. Why? Because you have to use the resources in a more intelligent manner. What is the point of producing those things which cost very high? The opportunity cost will become very, very high then. So that is the reason why our policy of self-sufficiency was a complete failure during the planning period between the first and eighth 5-year plans. And that is the reason why the government of India has said that we have tweaked this policy of self-sufficiency into self-reliance. That is what we say Atmanirbhar Bharat. All of you, will be studying all these things as part of your economy. That is what Atmanirbhar Bharat. The government says that Atmanirbhar does not mean self-sufficiency, it means self-reliance. So what is the difference between self-sufficiency and self-reliance? What is the difference between self-sufficiency and self-reliance? For everything you are putting up a blank page. What is the difference? Yes. See, self-reliance. America is self-reliant. America is not self-sufficient. America is one country that is hopelessly dependent on the rest of the world for everything. It is self-reliant. What does it mean? It means that it has the necessary economic might. It has the necessary economic strength to import anything that it wants from other countries. You don't have to worry about absence of any product in your country. Whatever you want, you can always import it, right? Or whatever you want, you can always ask others to come to your country, assemble it and produce it in your own country. You don't have to manufacture it, you can assemble it in that particular country. So self-reliance means you must have the economic might, economic strength to satisfy all your needs in spite of the fact that those goods are not produced in your own country. They are not produced in your own country, but there is huge amount of demand for them. And what is required for that? You need that foreign exchange. You need that economic strength. And that is what the government of India says now. The objective of Atmanirbhar is self-reliance. Let India become self-reliant rather than becoming self-sufficient. You cannot become self-sufficient because it is not possible for you to produce everything in your own country. As part of self-sufficiency, during the planning period, we have opted for import substitution. Import substitution means you always try to substitute those imports which were domestic production. Is it possible for you to produce all of them? At the end of the planning period, our Indian economy had collapsed because this policy of import substitution has failed. Because we did not have any petrol, crude oil resource in our country. Natural resource, we don't have any. So we had to depend hopelessly on this Arab world for our petroleum imports. So the policy was a complete failure. That is the reason why instead of this self-sufficiency, now the talk is about self-reliant. You earn money, you earn foreign exchange, you earn revenues so that you can use that money to import anything as and when you want, self-reliant. And this is what the government of India says as part of what we call Atmanirbhar Bharat policy. It says that it is not about self-sufficiency, it is about self-reliance. Making your country financially independent to get anything from the rest of the world. That you can do so only when you have huge amount of foreign exchange reserves, right? When you have huge amount of foreign exchange reserves. When can you have huge amount of foreign exchange reserves? When your exports are very high. When can you have your exports to be very high? Yesterday we have discussed when you have comparative advantage. When can you have comparative advantage? When you can give your domestic producers some kind of incentives. And that is the reason why, as part of this Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan policy of the government is not looking for make in India, it is looking for assemble in India. Get all the raw material, get all the technology, get all the inputs from the rest of the world, you assemble them in India, even then also you will get the tax incentives. The 6% in a cash by a cash return for cash scheme will be implemented, so that you can assemble them and then you can export them to the rest of the world. For example, on an iPhone that is being produced, that is assembled in China, China will be getting maximum $2 as part of revenues. but the volume is so much high that even this $2 becomes can become $200 billion also, and that is where China has become very, very successful. And India, as usual, is very late in adopting these kind of changes. So we have opted for this PLI scheme to basically emulate the success of China. And 2 years back, Economic Survey has pointed out the same thing. Instead of make in India, we should have assemble in India rather than make in India. So let the domestic manufacturers get all the raw material, technology, inputs, everything from foreign countries. Let them manufacture, let them assemble them in the country, and still they can benefit out of the scheme. So that is what the government says, right? Next, for example, if it is say the value added in India, value added means you assemble all the inputs and come out with the output. The value added in India will be around 17 to 25% to the total price. If the prices of all the inputs combined together is 100 rupees, and when you assemble and come out with the final product, it will be around 125 rupees. The value added in India through Assemble India will be around, say, 25%. 25%. And 25% value added in India will be 25%, and he will get a subsidy of around between 24 to 35%. He will get a subsidy of around 24 to 35% on the output, total output. He will get a subsidy of 24 to 35% under this PLI scheme. He will get a subsidy of around 24 to 35% under this PLI scheme. Right? So that means for every 100 rupees that he produces, he will be getting a subsidy of around 24 to 35%. On top of it, the state governments also impose 9% tax, GST, in a central GST and state GST. And the state governments are also giving this tax subsidy. So 35 plus 9%, 44%. So he will be getting around 44% subsidy. Even though he is not producing in India, he is getting around 44% subsidy. Automatically, his product would become that much competitive in the international market. Are you getting the point here? Yesterday you must have seen Maharashtra and Gujarat. They were fighting over one of these projects only, right? Vedanta, and it went to Gujarat. Why? Because Gujarat had offered more tax subsidies to the project. So on an average, you are getting almost 40% subsidies. That means your cost of production is coming down by that much percentage. It also means that your product becomes that much competitive in the international market, and your exports would also be very, very high. That is how China has ruled the market for a long period of time. Assemble in India. Whereas Make in India campaign was a failure because of the fact that the government had put the condition that Apple, before going to China, had come to India, and Apple has said that we want to manufacture Apple in India, Apple iPhones, not Apple, right? And India has said that you have to assemble, you have to buy all the raw material only from India. They said that get lost India. Make in India, get lost India, right? Now the government has changed the policy. Right now I think Apple is also coming. It is going to Chennai, I think, right? Right. That is what this is, and now what are the negative aspects of this policy? What are the negative consequences of this policy? This policy would be immensely benefiting manufacturers, right? But who will pay the price? It is the consumers. It is the consumers who suffer the most. Why? Because consumers are paying that extra 30% tax on imports. First one, it is the consumers. It is the consumers who pay the it is the consumers who pay the ultimate price. Who will be paying the ultimate price? Consumers, right? And then when the government is giving all these subsidies, where will this money come from? Again, that is what. Next one is taxpayers. It is the taxpayers who have to bear the burden of all these subsidies. And it is not only the domestic producers, international multinational companies also will be benefiting out of it. For example, yesterday, I think this one only, Foxconn only, Vedanta and Foxconn that Gujarat had given. And who will be paying for that profits of Foxconn? When they are getting 40% subsidy here, who will be ultimately paying for those 40% subsidies? Indian taxpayers. That is what we say. It is the taxpayers who suffer the most for all these kind of subsidies. It is the taxpayers, right? When Gujarat says that it has got this project, ultimately who will pay the price? Gujarat, the taxpayers. For example, domestic electricity, they will increase the charges because they are subsidizing the electricity for this multinational company. That is what we study in capitalism. In capitalism, profits are private and losses are public. So whatever the profits that are earning through all these subsidies, it has to be paid by the domestic consumers only in the form of increased taxes. This is what we call the negative. And these are all multinational companies. What do? They repatriate all those profits to their, country of origin. They repatriate all the profits. And who will pay the price? Domestic consumers for all those products. And what is the reason why the government is giving all these subsidies? What is the reason why the government is giving all these subsidies? What is the reason why government is giving all these subsidies? The government is giving all these subsidies because the government has said that their objective is to improve industrial activity, to improve infrastructure, and to also increase employment. Right? Is it being done? That's a multi-trillion-dollar question that we have to ask. Has it resulted in any increase in employment? No. Why? Because the country is still witnessing a job loss growth only. Right? Why? What is the reason why it has not led to any increase in employment? No. The problem is that most of this PLI scheme, industries are in the service sector, where employment potential is very, very less. On top of it, they are using automated technologies. So obviously there is no scope for any increase in employment. Are you getting the point here? They are using mostly automated technologies, robotics, to reduce their cost of production. On the one hand, they are using this automation, they are using robotics to reduce their cost of production, and they are earning huge amount of profits. They would repatriate all those profits to the foreign countries, and it is the taxpayers who will pay for the profits of all these countries. PLI scheme. That is what Raghuram Rajan talks about. That is what he says. Right? Next, proceeding further. Right? Let us, as we have spoken about PLI scheme, this cell phones only. Let us give one or two statistics here to see whether the scheme has been successful or not. Right? In the last quarter of 2019, our mobile exports were around $1.6 billion. Not mobile exports, our exports. Mobile exports were $1.6 billion. Mobile exports were $1.6 billion. And the imports were $4.4 billion. Imports were $4.4 billion. And deficit was exports $1.6 billion, imports $4.4 billion. And what is the deficit? $2.8 billion. Someone is saying 3.8. Very good. CSAT. Right? Then after the introduction of PLI scheme, in the last in a quarter of this 2021, exports were $2.7 billion. Exports were $2.7 billion. And imports were $5.2 billion. And net deficit $2.4 billion. Exports $2.7 billion. Imports $5.2 billion. Pardon? 2.7 and 5.2. Right? So I think it's already time. We can stop it here. Tomorrow we'll continue with this. Very important topic this is. Yeah. No, I cannot hear you. The chairman of Vedanta, what did he say? Yesterday I spoke to him, he did not say anything to me. You know. See, again, I cannot hear you. Right? You know, those who wanted to ask doubts, they can come and sit in the front. Right? Anyway, I will take up the doubts tomorrow in the class. Right? As usual, I'll just come back in more than 30 seconds. Right.